Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Thank you. Appointment of substitutes, and I think we have several. The Lurgy is going around amongst councillors.
Chair, yes, we have got some substitutes tonight, as you rightly say. Ed Kimball is here for Adam Scott, Gilda Sarah is here for Adrian Gregson, and Jenny Barnes is here for Robin Norfolk.
Thank you. And then we've got apologies from Councillor Riaz. Any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to see whether, for item 6, Ashwood Crematorium project, because we're talking about a building project, whether everyone here who sits on planning committee can stay here for that item. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a very pertinent point. I'm grateful to you for raising it. In our constitution, the good practice planning protocol makes the point that often it will be possible to participate in both aspects. However, if the policy committee is going to approve a scheme which later makes its way to planning committee, then that should be considered as something that would prevent members sitting at planning committee. And I think tonight we substantively do have a scheme in front of us. And those members who are on planning committee may prefer that when we get to that item, they recuse themselves so as to save themselves for planning committee. It's difficult because obviously in terms of numbers, I think you'll want to take a view on that. But I think you're right, we are technically approving a scheme tonight.
So how many people need to stay in this room in order to be quorate, if you see what I mean? Because we have got a number of members of the planning committee round the table.
Chair, just a third of the membership of the committee, it needs to stay. Some members of planning committee may prefer to stay in this item and understand that they won't participate at planning committee. But I don't want to put words in the mouths of the chair and vice chair, but they may have a different view.
Chair, would you like people who are on planning committee to show their hands so you've got an idea of numbers? Yeah.
There is enough of us left not on planning committee to be quorate for P&R. Yeah, okay. We might not be politically balanced, but we are human. We are elected councillors. Thank you. So that brings us on to public representation. I don't believe we have any this evening. Minutes of the last meeting on the 19th of November. If I go through them page by page, any comments or corrections or whatever. So page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Happy that I sign those as a true record of the meeting on the 19th. Thank you very much. So then on to the first substantive item, Elgar's birthplace, proposed transfer to the National Trust.
Thank you, Chair. So this proposal would be a decision in principle to grant a long lease of Elgar's birthplace, which the City Council owns, to the National Trust. At the moment, the property, some time ago, the property was leased by the council on a very long lease to the Elgar Birthplace Trust, which is a sub-trust of the Elgar Foundation. And the Elgar Foundation built and owned the visitor centre, which adjoins the Birthplace Trust. For the last 5 years or so, the National Trust have been running both the visitor centre and the Elgar's birthplace. The City Council has allowed the Birthplace Trust to sublet the property to the National Trust. The Elgar Foundation has been in discussions with the National Trust about transferring the visitor centre over to the National Trust. The National Trust has made a successful go of this over the last 5 or 6 years, and the Elgar Foundation thinks that the ownership of the visitor centre and the continued management of the visitor centre by the National Trust would be in their kind of long-term interests. The National Trust is very willing and keen to do that, but from its point of view, it would really only make sense if it had proper ownership or long-term ownership of the birthplace as well. So there have been discussions between the three parties, and the recommendation is that we would take a surrender and take the lease back from the Elgar Birthplace Foundation, obviously subject to their agreement, which they've signed up to, and then grant the National Trust a very long lease of the property. As I said, it would be a decision in principle. The more detailed terms of that lease would be delegated to officers in consultation with Chair to sign off. But making that decision now then enables the National Trust to go through its own governance and procedures and put that to the National Trust board or trustees, and that's the process that is likely to take sort of 12 months or so.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Pat?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a no-brainer in many ways. I mean, the National Trust is an important owner and curator and caretaker of a great many heritage assets around the country, among other things, of course, that it does. So securing the future of the Firs with the National Trust makes a lot of sense. I'm assured that we have no responsibility or ownership of artefacts that are in the Firs, and that they are the possession of, or in the ownership anyway, of the trust, the Elgar Trust. It's my hope that the Elgar Trust will not send any of those artefacts elsewhere, as it has done in the past, and that the National Trust will benefit as it says it wishes to, and that the Firs is therefore a meaningful venue for those people who want to learn more about Elgar and his life. So I would be in favour of this, and I hope very much that the Elgar Trust is listening to what we're saying.
Thank you. Councillor Round?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Agar has touched on what I was going to mention. At 3.4, we talk about the artefacts being transferred to the National Trust under their development policy. But looking at the development policy, it talks about the Trust has an active programme of lending collections to third-party exhibitions. Can the officer perhaps give some reassurance that artefacts that are key to Elgar's birthplace are not going to leave that property and are not going to go elsewhere in the world to be lost, because the birthplace is an important part of this city's history, and as it's been documented in the report, if those artefacts leave, the venue is effectively meaningless. So can we just have some reassurance, if that's okay? Thank you.
Well, obviously, any conditions about the transfer of those artefacts is something that's been under discussion and an agreement between the Birthplace Trust, who actually own those. You know, just as been said earlier, our interest is in the building. We don't own any of the memorabilia or the artefacts at the building. So as yet, we don't know all the detail of the intended transfer of those artefacts to the National Trust. As paragraph 3.4 does state, obviously the National Trust is keen to have them, because without them, then the birthplace doesn't make much sense. And obviously you've referred to the collections policy, and it does mention there about their ability, or that sometimes these things are lent elsewhere. That's obviously kind of a national collections policy, and it is not meant to kind of signal what they would intend doing with the artefacts at the Firs, at the Birthplace Trust. But as I said, this is a decision in principle, and we will investigate as far as we can about what restrictions the Elgar Birthplace Trust are putting on themselves, and how we may influence them to make sure that really important things kind of remain at the property, and that its use continues as a kind of museum and in Elgar's memory.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, I think it's hard to imagine a better caretaker for such a space than the National Trust. In a sense, it's almost surprising to imagine that it hasn't been more in their hands already. And when you think of the great estates of this country and those which are accessible to the public, they generally are now held by the National Trust, and for good reason. They are a well-trusted, responsible caretaker of these properties. And I think it's also fantastic that this puts Edward Elgar at the sort of the heart of that national cultural picture. It puts us up a stage in terms of our recognition as a city of culture. I think my only question is how we will ensure that we maintain those relationships with the National Trust so that the birthplace can be part of an integrated offer of cultural activities in Worcester. Should there be other activities through the Elgar Festival or other things, will the National Trust be willing to engage with us in making those happen? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, I've met with the National Trust, and so has Philippa, our museum's manager, more than once, in fact, right at the outset of this process, where they expressed their desire to take on a longer lease. Well, actually, originally it was to take the freehold, but we didn't want to go that far. And I can assure you that that Philippa does meet with the trust manager regularly, just by way of update, just to be assured that the building is still being maintained and the visitor numbers are still on track. So there is a live and positive and ongoing relationship between our museums manager and the National Trust manager. Thank you.
Chair, will you indulge me a very quick follow-up question? As I see in the report, the National Trust have already been operating the site for a number of years on behalf of the Elgar Foundation. I presume that from the perspective of a member of the public, they're not likely to notice a significant change in the service they're receiving from the Birthplace Museum.
No, there will be no change. This is just tidying up the ownerships and the leases.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other comments yet. I think probably Councillor Adrian Gregson is unable to be here this evening, but I know, as County Archivist and Chair of the Elgar Festival, he absolutely has an interest, and as it's somewhat diplomatically alluded to when Elgar's music manuscripts and that left the county. It was controversial and sad, and I think ownership of the birthplace is an important piece of history and a connection between this city, this council, and what is a really important part of our cultural heritage. And I think it's the only piece of property that we have outside of the city boundary, which just illustrates how important Elgar is to our city identity. So recommendations to note the proposed transfer of the Elgar Visitor Centre by the Elgar Foundation to the National Trust, and accept a surrender of the lease of Elgar's birthplace and grant a new 999-year lease to the National Trust on terms to be agreed under delegated powers by the Corporate Director, Finance and Resources, and Corporate Director, Planning and Governance, in consultation with Chair and Vice Chairs of this committee. All those in agreement? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item is Ashwood Crematorium project. So if planning committee members who wish to go. And we'll let you know when we've made a decision.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll just spend a few moments introducing the report, but just wanted to also introduce, for those members that have not met him, David Sabine, our retained project manager for this project, and who will assist with questions following my words. So we last spoke to you in May, and this committee approved £5.5 million that allowed officers to procure electric cremators and the associated SALEX grant works, so heat exchangers and those sorts of works as well. And also that included provision for fees and surveys to conclude REBA Stage 3 on this project. In this report, we're using three terms. We're using the back of house, we're using the full scheme, and we're also using the back of house plus. Back of house really relates to the SALEX grant related works, the cremator and the heat exchanger. The full scheme relates to both the back of house works and what was the aspirational project relating to the chapel extension and extensive refurbishment. And the back of house plus scheme is where we are now today, and the scheme that's being recommended to members to progress. The additional surveys and investigation work have now been concluded, and this report presents an updated cost for both the back of house and the full scheme, and also now includes a cost for the back of house plus scheme. The process has been supported by a public stakeholder consultation on a full scheme, and there's lots of really good feedback received on that. Unfortunately, as part of that costing work, it's become abundantly clear that proceeding with a full scheme is just unaffordable for the council, given the borrowing impact, both the capital and the borrowing impact, and the council's MTFP. So to put that into some context, the bereavement service produces a net income for the council each year of between £950 and £1 million. The borrowing cost you'll see for the full scheme is coming in at £850,000, so it almost wipes that net income out. And that's a critical income to us as a council in managing our MTFP. So, you know, in order to deliver a project that delivers both the SALEX associated works, which includes the removal of asbestos that's been picked up as part of the surveys and investigation, and the replacement of the roof covering, which has also been picked up as part of that work as well. The annual borrowing costs associated with the back of house plus scheme is £600,000 a year, which is obviously more affordable, and is recommended as part of this report. As part of that scheme, I just want to be absolutely clear with members, there is an investment in the chapel for improvement works. Members of the public will notice it, It'll be focused around refurbishment, both of the chapel and the chapel entrance. It'll be noticeable and you know, certainly around look and feel of the chapel building. And that investment is around £450,000. That will include also items such as EV charging points within the car park, and subject to further technical investigation work, and we're also hoping to include solar panels on the roof of the crematorium as well. Just to reassure members around where we've got to with cost estimates, there is a 15% contingency built in to the figures. I know that's a question members are very keen to understand. And members will also note that within the cost breakdown within the report, VAT has been included. We've worked with HMRC around whether or not we'd be able to get a VAT exemption, but the answers coming back are probably not. And so I think we've concluded that item. The report touches on the interim arrangements. So this project we're programming in will take us 9 months in terms of a build, and we've included some details on the work that's going on to finalise the interim arrangements and the financial impact of that, which we believe will be in the region of £250,000. Communications and engagement will be critical around that when we finalise those plans, not just with you know, funeral directors, but of course with families and with members of the public as well. So they're absolutely clear on what they can expect during that period. We're not planning for any loss of income during that period. We'll continue to provide services. We'll obviously continue to provide cremations, albeit through another facility. And the reason for me saying that is that we'll work hard with funeral directors and key stakeholders to make sure that the interim arrangements are as good as they can be and work for everybody. The report briefly talks about the operating and running costs of the improved site, and we'll provide more detail in the next report to members on that point. But we're absolutely expecting to deliver some revenue benefits there around energy and maintenance. And we've also updated members on the procurement of our electric cremator manufacturer. So we're pleased to be able to say that we've appointed DFW following an extensive procurement process that included lots of due diligence. Programme is included at section 6. And members will see that we are due to be on site with a fair wind in August 25, and that will be a 9-month build, so finishing around April 26. Again, we talk about community engagement strategy, so I've mentioned that, but just to emphasise that will be a critical part of this piece of work, and something we'll keep members updated on. The other thing members will note that we've included a risk register around this project. Again, something we know members are very keen to see, but given the value of the project, it's important to include that, and it's also important to reassure members that those key risks are being kept in sight and reviewed. So just to finish, Chair, just in terms of what the report is recommending, we're asking members to note the work carried out to date. We're asking members to approve us proceeding with Scheme C, what we're referring to as the Back of House Plus scheme, based on affordability grounds. To recommend an adjustment to the capital programme up to 6.96 million, and obviously the corresponding impact on the MTFP. And then to delegate officers to submit a planning application and any other necessary regulatory approvals, to procure services to support work up to REBA stage 6, and then to procure and appoint a mains work contractor up to a value of 2.674 million, and then to take all other steps to bring the project to a conclusion. And that element of the recommendation will be overseen by the Major Programmes Member Reference Group. So before I stop, Chair, apologise for my phone going off. And you've got to front up to these things, haven't you? Yeah, happy for myself and David to take any questions.
So who's your colleague talking to? Is he arranged?
Probably the wife.
Thank you very much. Did David want to say anything in particular to add to that, or he's here to answer the awkward questions?
Thank you, Chair. Not at this point, just to assist with the questions.
Thank you, Chair. And I do think now if maybe all officer recommendations could come with some soft jazz in the background, it might, might help things go along. So thank you for the report and for the all-member briefing and for the consultation programme. I found the guides, the tour of the back of house very interesting when we were there. Although I wasn't available for the all-member briefing, I did catch up on it later. I wanted to pick up on a point that came up in the briefing for members, and also I've seen online in social media and in the paper as well, that we are spending £5 million on this project to go green. Now, obviously, it says £7 million, but I wanted to be clear for the public watching, and I would appreciate if our brilliant local journalists could make this point in the paper as well, that we are not spending millions of pounds to go green as part of this project. This project is to replace our crematoriums with new ones because the current crematoriums are reaching their end of life, and to refurbish our crematorium to ensure it meets the needs of residents and funeral directors. And I want to be clear on this because our officers have done a really great job in taking that brief and coming up with a proposal which delivers and significantly cuts our carbon output and cuts our running costs and reduces the cost of the project, because the electric crematoriums enable us to get a £1.5 million grant, which reduces the net cost of the project for this council by 700,000, because I think the marginal cost for electric crematoriums was 800,000 on top of the gas crematoriums. So we needed to spend that money anyway, but we are now spending less because of the electric crematoriums. So again, I can only express my massive thanks to officers for getting that grant and proposing this and making us a leader in the region for this. But I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on that we're not spending millions of pounds to go green. We are spending millions of pounds to save this council money in the future. Now, having said that, I'm very happy to see the inclusion of solar panels and the EV charging in the project, but I do have a couple of questions. So speaking to funeral directors at the consultation and in the cemeteries and crematorium forum, they wanted to see an electric trolley being available, as it would allow them to bring less staff, saving them money, and also a lowered catafalque. Can we confirm that both of these are included in the project, please? And on point 7.3, about keeping stakeholders informed about access through the cemetery during construction, can we ensure that St Barnabas and Bishop Barone are kept informed, as I know that parents and children do walk through the cemetery on their way to and from school, and also I would personally like to be kept informed as I run the St Barnabas bike bus, which does go through the cemetery every Monday. So if there are any access issues, I would like to know, please. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. The electric trolley, yes, that's going to be adopted, and the lower catafalque and voiles and the various other feedback from the consultation with the use and the operation of the chapel will also be incorporated. In terms of the key stakeholders, we mentioned through the report that there's going to be a full communications strategy put in place with the communications team to ensure not just the immediate stakeholders, funeral directors, but also neighbours and other key groups and parties will be continually updated and informed of progress.
And absolutely, although there'll be a period in which the cremators are closed, the site is going to be open throughout as now, because it's it's an important site, and it's important that people are able to continue to visit graves and loved ones. I've got Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I just really, I know we're not going, well, option B is not the recommendation, I understand why, but I just wondered what the impact, or whether within the risk register you've accounted for the fact that the CCTV isn't going to be implemented, or is there going to be a different sort of CCTV? I mean, what is the impact of that CCTV no longer being in the project?
There will be an upgrade, an inclusion of audio-visual screens outside the chapel and inside the chapel as well. Apart from the inclusion of some new screens for participation, at this point there's no inclusion of an upgrade to the audio-visual and CCTV network itself. It's going to be new screens, additional screens for attendance at services. It's not going to be a wholesale removal and installation of a new system.
So I was asking what the impact of that is.
It's status quo. So there's already it's status quo. So there's already a CCTV system in place at the chapel. So this isn't the fact that we're not putting one in prompts. There is one there. We're just not renewing it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, an awful lot of work has gone into this. I do want to ask the officer, if I could, about the accessibility. There's one disabled toilet on site, as far as I know, and in consultation, a lot of disability groups have contacted me expressing concerns about the accessibility of the toilet, in that it cannot be accessed in terms of a wheelchair, a motorised wheelchair or a mobility scooter. Are there any plans to upgrade the toilet that's there so it's inclusive and accessible to all?
I think we're currently taking advice from one of our building control consultants on whether or not there's a need for us to be able to do it, because obviously we've got a cost envelope we're trying to work within. I think, as with all council projects, if we can include that within the project, that we absolutely will look to do that. But at the moment, as it stands, there are no plans to improve accessibility, but just some general improvements to toilets. As part of the consultation process, we have not picked anything up in terms of feedback of that nature. And from talking to staff on site as well, neither have we received that feedback through general customers that are using it. So that's new information to us.
Thank you. Yeah, the other issue as well, again, you know, I work with disability groups. The other feedback that I'm getting is about there are only 2 disabled car parking spaces on site. And it's proving difficult because we have an ageing population and more blue badge users. Again, is there any scope, or is that not in this current project, but is there scope in the future to increase the number of disabled car parking spaces?
It's not included in the current project. Obviously, we will need to take potentially another 2 spaces out if we want to, when we include EV charging spaces, but absolutely something that we can look to include as part of any future work.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to points of 5.12 to 5.14, which is related to the sort of new statutory guidance on the permitted kind of emissions and mercury abatement, which looks like there's a delay in that guidance becoming statutory because of the change of government. So in 5.14, it's saying that the additional installation will be done when the legislative requirement, when the legislation requires it, which seems like that's likely to happen, you know, relatively soon after, maybe up to a maximum of a year after we complete the project. So it seems that it would be cheaper to just have it done at the same time when it's being constructed. I note that it says that there's no significant downtime for installation, but presumably there will be an additional cost compared to doing it when you have the contractor on site during construction. And has that been considered, that we just go ahead with it anyway, given that it looks like it will be a statutory requirement in the near future anyway?
I'll let David comment after me. The regulatory priority is mercury abatement, and so the work that we will do, you know, next year, that will be in the DNOx or the NOx reduction equipment. That is the one that we believe will come in, but we're unsure yet. From visiting other sites, it really is a matter of just bolting a bit of kit on. the majority of kit is already there. It's just adding some, I can't remember, the reagent, I think is the terminology, in order for it to work. So at the moment, we're not seeing it as some significant additional cost further up the line, but I'll let David comment as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, without making it sound too simple, it literally is a plug into the system. The DFW plant has already been designed to be able to incorporate it as and when it becomes required.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. I mean, this is a major project and a huge investment on part of the City Council in our crematorium, and that it's a really important place, you know, for our residents and an important service that we provide. We've already made some decisions and to make progress on this, and it is about delivering huge environmental improvements and carbon reduction. And I think, you know, the consultation and the feedback that we had from members of the public and funeral directors was really important. And what we've got in front of us now is about kind of balancing the working environment for funeral directors and for our staff, and the experience of grieving families. So I think the recommendations are that we go ahead with option C, which is back of house plus. So that's putting in the new electric cremators, chapel refurbishment, and to the entrance and to the staff areas, and new fixtures and fittings, which I think, you know, will make a really important difference. And it's also kind of worth noting that that option, that the service won't need to be closed, the crematorium won't need to be closed for such a long period than if we went for the other option. So there are a number of reasons why back of house plus is the recommendation. It's a long page of recommendations. I don't need to read them all out. So what we are agreeing to is to go with the back of house plus to progress to the next stage of REBA design and project planning, to make an adjustment to the medium-term financial plan, which will result in a minimum revenue pressure of £600,500 per annum from 26-27. And the time frame is important because we need to use the SALEX grant within a fixed time period. Authorise officers with the oversight of the major programmes member reference group to seek planning application, progress the design, undertake procurement and progress the project. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimously agreed by a sufficiently quorate committee. Thank you. So I think we've got everybody, all members back in the room. And moving on to item 7, draft medium-term financial plan 2025 to 2030, draft budget, capital programme and council tax for next financial year. So you plugged in, Sal? You poised to talk?
I think so. Yep.
Good.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read and provide a brief overview on the report, picking up on the salient points. It's worth bearing in mind that the report doesn't include any references to the UK SPF announcements that we had on Friday, and we are still awaiting the formal financial settlement from government, which we expect this week. So, the report identifies a number of priorities. The key one is to set a realistic and balanced budget for the next financial year, and a budget that's achievable, sustainable, and able to withstand financial pressures. The report also identifies the key financial assumptions which are based on known and expected changes, and these include assumptions on council tax, on business rates, price inflation, salary increases, interest rates, etc. And based on these assumptions, the forecast budget gap for 25-26 stands at about 1.3 million. And for the purposes of this report, we're temporarily balancing this through reserves. Also included in the report are some of the key announcements from the finance policy statements. Perhaps the most important announcement was the introduction of the Extended Producer Responsibility Fund, which is unring-fenced and amounts to £0.95 million for 25-26. And our proposal is to transfer this into a service transformation reserve. The summary financial headlines from the MTFP are identified in section 6, and the draft MTFP includes several identified cost pressures. These include increased vehicle maintenance cost, software licensing, pressures on our housing benefit subsidy, and all of these have been discussed during the 24-25 reporting. Our main income streams, including our assumptions for car parking, trade and garden waste collections, bereavement services and planning income, are also identified. The draft capital programme is identified here. It amounts to £32 million for the MTFP period. And included within the programme are new vehicles, the cremators and improvements at the crematorium, which you just heard about, improvements at Purdyswell, wheelie bin replacements, DFGs, ICT infrastructure, and of course the ongoing projects within the Future High Streets and Towns Fund. Section 7 of the report identifies a draft budget and council tax, and this includes a reconciliation between the budget gap for 25-26, when the budget was originally set in February 2024, and what it looks like now. There's also a high-level breakdown of earmarked reserves provided at 7.7, and further down there are details about the risk reserve and the new service transformation reserve, which I just mentioned, including the early calls on those reserves in 2025-26. The calculation of the council tax base is also included in this section and identified in more detail at Appendix 3. It shows that the council tax base for Worcester City Council and Warndon and St Peter's Parish Councils, which gives a total of 33,571.1. The report also includes some comments regarding the need to create sustainable savings in order to put the council in a more financially sustainable position. The budget is going to be kept under review as the budget process is taken forward right up to full council consideration in February. And on that note, Chair, taking into account the recommendations at the beginning of the report, I'll hand back to you and hopefully answer questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are obviously a number of assumptions at this point in time, but carefully thought through as to the level of risk and the probability. So open to questions and comments. Jenny?
The government has recently announced a reduction in payments on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, reducing payment per month to homeowners who accommodate refugees from £500 per month down to £350 per month. How will that affect our situation? is obviously if there's less money coming in, that might have a knock-on for people needing to be rehoused as a consequence. And has that been put into the equation anywhere?
In terms of the monies that we receive, we passport those monies back out. In terms of the actual specifics around the Homes for Ukraine aspect, it's probably more appropriate for Lloyd to come in.
Thanks, Sal. Yeah, we have a Homes for Ukraine reserve that we've still got available to us. We've received notification of what you've mentioned, Councillor Barnes, in the last week or so. And our current policy position is that we pay an enhanced level of support. So at this point in time, with the reserve we've got, we don't see us moving away from that position. We'll continue to pay that enhanced level of support.
I do need to declare an interest then, because I am in receipt of that money. I apologise to the committee for not announcing that, but I expected that just the figures would reduce according to government policy. I'm embarrassed that I overlooked that, but I do think that there is an issue, that it could mean that at the moment the City Council is paying an enhanced payment, so the difference between what the government is now going to be paying over and what the City Council is going to be paying over is even more, an extra £250 per month per household that is accommodating, and I do think that does need to be considered in the budget process.
And again, just to reiterate, the level of reserve we've got, it's not going to create any revenue pressure on our core budget. So we're absolutely satisfied. We can continue to do that for another year, and we can review and take stock ahead of budget setting for 26-27.
And I think in more general terms, we're awaiting the financial settlement from government. That's our next big stock take of where we are financially. That will be the case of this week. And as I said in the closing statements, the budget is going to be kept under review as we work towards the February council decision. So there's quite a bit still to sort of be taken into consideration, Councillor Barnes. So.
Thank you. I think it's a useful clarification, and actually if you're able to give kind of reassurance to those families who are still hosting Ukrainians for the forthcoming financial year, that's a really positive story. So thank you for that. Further questions? Alex first.
Thank you. You mentioned the UK SPF allocation. I admit, because I'm new to the council, I don't know what difference this makes. Does that make any difference to our budget gaps going forward, or what would that be used for, please?
So it's a grant that comes in which we can split into revenue and capital. There's a revenue and a capital allocation. There will be opportunities for us to see if we can identify use of the UK SPF to help with some of the activities that we're currently undertaking within the authority. And that's a piece of work that we started to look at, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. If I could refer the Director of the Officer to Appendix number 2, we had a brief chat before the meeting, but in the interests of those members of the parish of St Peter's who will be listening into this meeting, Appendix 2, we talk about power park play equipment. You've got 12,000 there, and there's an allocation of 106, Section 106 monies of 100,000. I just need to seek some clarification as to that should be ring-fenced. Will it be ring-fenced, and when will it appear on the capital programmes budget? And the 12,000, I was always led to believe that 12,000 would it be included within the 100,000 for the Section 106 monies? Can I just have some clarification? Is it 12,000 plus the 100,000 that we've got for capital programmes going forward? Thank you.
So my understanding, Councillor, is that the scheme hasn't been formally approved yet. Therefore, £100,000 isn't included in the capital programme yet. So the capital programme will be set, but it's a live programme and things get added to it during the course of the year. And the £12,000 will be added to the 100,000.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a very specific small question to ask, and then I've got a more general question that I was going to get to. So looking at, and you'll excuse me if I'm using a touchpad for this, I was looking at the list of incomes, and there was an assumption made that the garden waste income, I think it was the garden waste income, was not going to go up because there was an assumption of no further uptake in the scheme. I just wanted to ask why, if that's all right. It's an information question for me.
So currently, currently we're looking at, this is based on the income we're receiving at the moment. So we're putting an increase on the price, but we expect the overall income levels to be maintained about where the budget was set for 24-25.
Thank you. If I may be cheeky and ask a more general couple of follow-up questions. There's obviously the risk identified around ash dieback. Have we got any further insights into the scale of the cost that could potentially reach? I think that some sense of the scale would probably be quite helpful. I obviously also note that the Scala project is mentioned as one of those potential challenges. One would hope it might also be a potential opportunity, but I just note that it is there. Again, do we have a sense of the scale of how this would set our budget? I mean, I think it's one of the challenges looking at a report like this. It's fairly dry reading. It doesn't necessarily give you a clear perspective on the sense of the scale of the risk that's in play, or the potential, you know, whether the risk is particularly great that something could go wrong, or the potential cost if it did. So just your assessment would be very welcome.
So on ash dieback, I think I'll hand over to my learned colleague, Mr. Griffiths.
Bit of an overstatement, but I'll take it. So the scale of ash dieback is not as bad as first feared. That's the feedback that we're getting from the team, and Environment Committee receive a twice yearly report that updates on the work of the team and where we are in terms of what we're finding. Just to reassure members, Environment Committee approved a small reserve for ash dieback work. I think it was in the region of £60,000-70,000. We've probably not used 15 or 20% of that at maximum. The team were able to do the work they need to do on priority trees related to ash dieback, and do the monitoring work, and do the day-to-day tree management work as well. So at the moment, not as bad as first feared, and everything under control.
And it's one of those areas that we look at on an annual basis anyway, in terms of the reserve and what's happened in terms of expenditure. In terms of the Scala, a lot of it depends on the business plan in terms for the opening. So during the course of next year, I think some of those plans will start to crystallise, and we'll have more of an idea on whether there's going to be a need for a small subsidy moving forward into 26, 27, 27, 28. But at this moment in time, you know, it could be possibly 50,000, it could be 150,000. But like you say, it could be an opportunity for generating income as well. There's still quite a lot of work that still needs to be done on there. It's highlighting the fact that there could be a pressure in the future as a result of the Scala opening.
And just to come back I won't ask any more after this. I can see Lynn's, Lynn is sort of getting ready to tell me off. I was just going to say, are there any steps that are being taken to mitigate that potential risk and to ensure that it will be a success? Because obviously it's a fantastic scheme. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So the Policy and Resources Committee will remember that when the business plan came before this committee in July, one of the decisions that was taken was to agree in principle to allocate funding from the medium-term financial plan to get the project from concept into operation, so creating a new entity and staffing that and putting on the first creative programme. But that also it recognised that for the first couple of years it's likely to need a subsidy. We discussed those figures at some considerable length in the July report and recognised that there were a number of uncertain factors ahead of us, but the number that's gone in that the committee supported as a top level number, 150,000 per annum, is based on all the advice that had gone into the business plan and all the sector benchmarking and external input we've had. But you may also recall that the risk is mitigated significantly if other funding is attracted. We obviously have the opportunity to bid for funding from a number of sources, and as you know, we have a funding bid going in relation to the Arts Council. That won't fund directly Scala costs, but it's undoubtedly part of that ecosystem of which we've seen in the last few years, where we do have some funding success. It can generate more success on the back of it, and investor confidence can grow. And you'll probably remember as well that the business plan is not predicated on the basis of all the income will come from ticket sales on cultural events. It's very much predicated on a strong income stream from the food and beverage. And you'll also recall how important it is, therefore, to us to deliver on the Corn Exchange, which will be coming back to this committee as soon as possible.
Thank you. Yes, I remember that well, and let's hope it's a huge success. But I was just thinking, we always tend to think, particularly when we're thinking of revenue, that our budgets are all doom and gloom, but they're not entirely, because if you look at 5.2, there's a new guarantee that no council will see cash reduction in its core spending power if we increase council tax by the maximum of 2.99%. Since we're proposing to do that, I think it's reasonable to suppose that that revenue support grant will increase by CPI, and that we won't be in a worse position than we already are in that respect. So it's sort of good news.
Yes, thank you, Pat, for kind of drawing attention to that. So we know the principles of what the grant will be and how the new government is working. And in fact, if I can just take the chance, so one of the there was the kind of promise from central government of no cash reduction to any council, and where possible to start to move towards fairer funding for councils. What of course, and that will be targeted around need and areas of deprivation. What we don't know at this time is as to where Worcester City rates overall within that sort of spectrum of deprivation, because we do have some areas within the city that are very significant levels. So yeah, thank you for that. I've got Jessie next.
Thank you, Chair. So as we are all aware, before the last general election, we were allocated £5 million in capital funding by the previous administration, and that capital funding seems to be at risk at this stage, and we don't have a clarity of what will happen with that £5 million. So my question is, what is the impact of the potential loss of that £5 million in capital funding on the financial viability of the Scala project and the Corn Exchange building?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, we have uncertainty over the 5 million levelling up fund. We were asked to respond to a consultation on whether we should be treated as an exceptional case, and the government should continue with the process of granting us that 5 million or part of it. And we made our submission last Friday in response to that consultation request. So we now have about 6 weeks to wait until we hear whether we get some or part of the money. In terms of the particular project within the £5 million programme, there is a project for £1.7 million towards the Corn Exchange building for the construction of the additional mezzanine levels. Clearly, that would enhance the overall attractiveness of the venue, and we would hope very much that that attractiveness would result in a food and beverage operator bringing in new footfall and new business and increased turnover. Without that money, it is difficult to say what the ultimate impact will be, as we've not concluded the food and beverage procurement process. But I would say at this stage, it is fair to say that it's likely to have a negative impact on the overall viability. The scale of that impact, of course, at this stage, we don't know. Thank you.
It's probably fair to say that I know our local MP has been lobbying the minister, the relevant minister, with regard to the Culture Fund, and we have put in the submission and response to make the case for the payment and why, you know, across the spectrum of those projects as to why Worcester should get the money. So I don't know whether we know when we're likely to get feedback. No.
Through you, Chair, I think we've been told that it's about 6 weeks before we'll know the outcome.
I'm not seeing any further hands up. This is an important document. It is kind of somewhat interim in that tomorrow we are expecting to get the settlement, and then you'll be beavering away and recalculating and working out the impact of that and the significance of it. This does contain kind of the ambition and the risks for this council and what we want to achieve. And there is a budgetary challenge, and in order to, at this point in time, to look at balancing the books, we are going to be having to look at savings, ways of doing things differently, and potential income and increasing income. So we cannot be complacent. It is a challenge to run good local council services and all the services that that Worcester people expect and that we want to deliver for the city. We kind of don't want to compromise on our ambitions, but we do need to be mindful of the resources required and how we use our resources really carefully. With the recommendations, there is a kind of important legal one, isn't there, within that, which is item 1.2 of the recommendations. So I'll read that one in full, because this is about agreeing what the council tax base will be, i.e. the number of residents that live within Worcester City, and that information is then shared with other tax raising authorities. So the County Council, Police and Crime Commissioner and the Fire Authority. So they'll be listening with bated breath for the answer. So the recommendations before us to look at the draft medium-term financial plan and the proposed budget that the committee approves in accordance with the local authority's calculation of tax base regulations 1992, the local authority's calculation of council tax base amendment England regulations 2003, and the local authority's calculation of council tax base regulations 2012, that the council tax base regulation for the year 25-26 will be 33,571.1 for Worcester City Council, including 4,069.9 for Warndon Parish Council and 2,189.1 for St Peter's Parish Council. Other recommendations note the proposals and that they'll be updated with the publication of the local government finance settlement, and that the committee invites all political groups or individual members to notify the interim director of finance and resources no later than the 31st of December of any other budget proposals that they want officers to explore and that can be considered at meetings in the new year in committees. So votes in favour of those recommendations. Thank you. Anybody voting against? Any abstentions? So 2 abstentions from Councillor Jagger and Councillor Alcott. Everybody else has voted in favour for that to go through. Thank you. So next we have Treasury Management mid-year report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the mid-year Treasury Management report of the Council, and it's in line with the SIPFA Treasury Management Code and our own annual Treasury Management strategy. We take our Treasury Management advice from Arlene Close, who keep us up to date regularly, and a lot of the introduction of this setting the scene of the external economic climate and market and how we monitor our credit risk is provided directly from them. The main points of the report are in section 3, that shows our current level of investments and borrowing at the 30th of September 2024 compared to what we were investing and borrowing at the 31st of March. You'll note that the level of investments increased by over 10 million since 31st of March, but this is typical of the level of investment following the pattern of cash flow movement throughout each year. Section 4 then talks about borrowing in more detail, and table 3 showing a detailed breakdown of our current borrowing. We have not borrowed anything so far this year, but we do have plans in place to borrow more money next year to support the capital programme, and that's built into our budget projections. Section 5 then gives more information on the current investments, and table 4 shows a further breakdown of these investments. The report also notes our £3 million investment in the externally managed pooled funds, which are held for investment purposes, currently generating 4.6% interest. The government does not currently appear to be extending their previous statutory override, which means we will now need to record unrealised losses and gains from this investment. And the impact of this is potentially 400 to 500,000 in the revenue budget in 25-26. The remainder of the report goes on to discuss the non-treasury investments, which are property, and also details our performance and compliance results. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. The technical side of money. Have we got any excited accountants in the room? Councillor Mace.
I have a very boring technical question. Having read about the Lobo loan a number of times, and I understand that it's the 2 opportunities per year where the lender can change the rate, and if they choose to do that, we can then pay it off, and the council would expect to do that. But I'm not sure I've ever seen written down what the current rate on that loan is, so I'm just wondering what it is in case there's a chance it might change soon. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The current rate is 4.5%. We've had advice from Arlene Close, and the risk of a call at the next call date, which is June 2025, is around 42%, which we're told is not very likely. Feels high to me, but...
No other questions? Pat?
Thank you. Given the recent election in the United States, the Fed has said, I think there are rumours in the last few weeks that the Fed's changing interest rates. I mean, is that going to affect anything we're doing?
Very possibly, yes. We do rely quite a lot on our advisors because they scour the international markets, and there's only 2 general advisors in the local government market, so Arlene Close have probably got about 50% of the council business, so they are sort of top dollar in terms of advice that we get. So we do take their steer in terms of organisations that we can invest in, as well as what the economic impact is going to be moving forward. So we'll wrap that up as part of our budget setting when we get to Q3 anyway, because that could have an impact on our interest rates for next year and the year after.
I should explain, I do read the economics columns of the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Louis.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the reports, and at the bottom of the report, we don't have the usual equality, human resources, social, environmental and economic implications. I was just wondering, because obviously the investment in money is really important, particularly as so much money is invested in ways which actually fuels things that are extremely damaging to the environment and for other things that probably as a council we don't want to invest in. So I'm just wondering whether that could be included in the next report, please, so that we know that our investments are to the social, environmental and economic implications that we would value as a council. Or would it be appropriate for this kind of report, I suppose?
I don't know whether it's a finance question or a governance question. Is this potentially just a subset of our budget, is it?
Through you, Chair, I think this is just because this has come as an interim report for information and noting, it doesn't have all the implications. Obviously, when the Treasury Management Strategy is set, then it's a decision item. It's just simply because it's an interim information report. That's why we don't have all the implications.
So when would we get that report, please, with those implications on? Is it an annual thing?
So each year, as part of budget setting, the Treasury strategy is set. So in February 2024, there would have been a Treasury Management Strategy for this current year. And we have to provide a 6-month review and an end-of-year review. So in February 2025, there will be the new draft strategy for Treasury Management, and that's where we'll see all the other elements and considerations that we have to do.
So that will be part of the budget decision making, that budget meeting.
Yes. Yeah. There's capital strategy, treasury strategy. There's a number of other things that we take into consideration.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, well done. It's a significant achievement that we haven't undertaken any borrowing this year, and I think it's worth noting, isn't it, that we have benefited from funds and grants that we have received and have squirreled away to good effect to gain interest. Managing the funds, absolutely. So the recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the mid-year report in accordance with the SIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management in Public Services and the Prudential Code of Capital Finance. All those happy to note. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So agenda item 9, draft city plan. So this is draft city plan 2025 to 2030 for consultation.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you, Chair. The current Worcester City Plan was adopted by the Council back in February 2022 and was intended to be a 5-year plan to 27, drafted as the world emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic. And since the plan was published, there have been quite a number of changes to the social, the economic and the political environment, and the change in the political makeup of the Council. So it's therefore timely to review the existing plan and agree a new plan for the next 5 years. The objectives of our city plan are to set out the Council's ambitions for the City of Worcester, so wider than the Council itself, to steer the policies and strategies of the Council, and to provide a statement of our strategic aims and purposes for funding bodies and potential partners, something that's served us very well in recent years in submitting grant applications. We undertook an initial consultation between the 16th of September and the 11th of October. So that had a number of limbs to it. A letter was sent out to stakeholders from over 130 organisations across the city, inviting them to comment on the existing plan themes. Alongside this, there was a public consultation undertaken on the website, promoted through social media, and officers also engaged in a small number of face-to-face discussions with key stakeholder organisations for a more in-depth and nuanced discussion. We received a total of 181 responses, of which 16 were representing the stakeholder organisations and the remainder identified as residents of the city. We did note there was an absence of young people responding to the public consultation. This will be an area of focus for the second stage consultation on the draft new plan, and we have a couple of meetings arranged already through the local colleges to do something in early January. Just to note that the annual survey consultation, which supports the budget setting process, has run alongside this consultation. That consultation is now closed. It's a more detailed statistical survey which is currently being analysed, and that will be available for presentation to the committee in February, and we'll use that as we finalise the plan, hopefully, in the new year. So just some highlights really from the initial consultation. Now, the existing plan was broadly supported, but there were a number of areas that were highlighted as needing more focus or detail. Prosperity for all, so this is a 2.11. Prosperity for all, founded on an inclusive and strong economy, but a broader definition to that, to look at mental, physical and social health and political engagement as part of prosperity. A focus on people. Feedback that there should be a direct and a more direct focus on sustainability and the climate and biodiversity emergencies and the city's resilience and response to those. It was raised that the city's heritage includes green space, arts and culture, as well as the built environment. The importance of quality affordable housing was raised, and the need for the council to be a listening organisation. So based on the consultation and engagement with members through political group leaders, a text for a draft new plan has been produced. An ambitious, vibrant and welcoming historic city with opportunities for everyone. That's provided at Appendix 1, and we're asking the committee tonight to approve that draft text of that new plan for consultation. And it sets out the ambition for the city and the role of the council in working towards that. It stretches wider than the responsibilities of a district council, but it is intended to be a framework of ambition, that ambition in the context of finite local government resources. And so a balance that we're striking there. There are 5 themes in the draft plan. Theme 1 is a city where everyone can prosper. So as I said, founded on that economic livelihood and prosperity, but includes health, well-being, social and political inclusion. A resilient and sustainable city, a city that is resilient to climate change that is happening now, but also plays its part in the global fight against climate change. Theme 3 is strong and engaged communities. A number of themes come out through that around pride in the city, pride in community, communities treating each other with kindness and respect, people belonging to multiple and overlapping communities across the city, and a strong emphasis on volunteering, which is something which is a feature of our city. Theme 4 is an attractive heritage city with a vibrant modern culture. So I've talked about that wider definition of heritage that will include our green spaces, will include our museums, our festivals. And then theme 5, a healthy and active city, a city where activity is a part of daily life. People have a choice as to how to live those healthy and active lives, choice around the way that they travel, the way they move around. Also includes focus on air quality and that mix of leisure and sport activity. So the plan is there for you to read. Hopefully members have had opportunity to go through that. It's a plan with quite a lot of detail in it. I've just given you the themes there.
The alternative option is not to renew the city plan. I mean, the existing one has been a successful document, but things have changed in the external and internal environment, and so it's recommended that we do update our plan. So thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I would commend that plan to you, and you approve that we can take that forward for consultation in the new year with a view to bringing a plan back in February for approval.
Thank you very much. I've got Ed.
I feel like I might be stealing my colleague's thunder because Jill and I both talk a lot about this topic. Under 2.9, it talks about that it is noted that there was an absence of young people responding to the public consultation informing the city plan, and this will be an area of focus for the second stage on the draft new plan. Could you outline for us how the new phase of consultation will be carried out differently to ensure that more young people, or to improve the likelihood that more young people will respond to it? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I mean, we've got a number of limbs to this. We've been in touch with the Student Union President at the university, and we would hope to get some engagement there, noting that a number of university students will be away actually for the next number of weeks, but there's some contacts we can use there. We have a focus group arranged for early January with Heart of Worcestershire College, so that's in the diary. And this afternoon I've been speaking to Helen Davis at the Community Trust about them facilitating some work with a number of the young people's groups in 3 of the community centres, again to be done in early January. And there's a couple of other organisations we're in touch with, but those ones are concrete. We've arranged those already.
Sorry, I thought Ed wanted to come back. Was that?
I was just going to say something about that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I've often said here, in various committees here and full council as well, that this doesn't strike me as a city with a vibrant youth culture. So we really do need to be very active in this area of endeavour. It would be nice to know which community centres you were focusing on, because we do have some with a lot of disadvantaged young people. So perhaps you can let us know that. And the other thing is, I hope that you will talk to the Sixth Form College as well, because they're of an age where they will be voting quite soon, and they will have, you know, they will be living their lives in accordance with what we're doing. The other thing is, I commend the amount of work that's gone into this. It's been huge, obviously. I love the new strapline. You know, it's about time we had a strapline that meant something to all of us. So that's terrific. But speaking with my Armed Forces champion hat on, we just signed the Armed Forces Covenant, and it seems to me that we actually need something quite specific in here that lets people know that we are complying with that covenant and that we are taking it forward. So that would be helpful. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, and I'm sure Claire Chaplin would. I mean, a good starting point would be the report and covenant that we signed up to on Tuesday.
Thank you. I'll pick up which WCT centres was. It wasn't any 3 in particular. I think it was 3 existing groups that were running that we'd be able to facilitate within early January. I think that one of the difficulties here is we're not able to do every group across the whole of the city, but very happy to pick that up with you, and also pick up that conversation about the Armed Forces Covenant, which is something we can include as we take forward the final draft. Thank you.
I imagine it'll be at the Worcester Community Trust centres where the 3 centres where they are running youth activities. And we know that's not every centre, but that is at least a significant conversation with some young people in the city. I've got Elaine next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officer. There's a considerable amount of work has gone into this. At the risk of sounding like a complete stuck record, and I know it drives everybody up the wall, but I'm always concerned that those who are digitally excluded in society have not had access to any consultation, or, you know, not everybody is online. Not everybody has access to the internet. There are many, many segments of our society where people cannot afford the internet, the elderly do not have access to the internet, and the disabled. And we need to do more proactively as a council to engage with those groups in our society so that they are included in everything that we do going forward. Just because someone doesn't have access to online internet doesn't mean that they should be excluded. And I just get concerned all the time when the feedback I get, particularly from disability groups, is they feel left out, they are not engaged with directly. You know, it's just such a shame. This is such an important document that is going to shape the way that we see things going forward, and yet so many people have not had the chance to comment or be involved in it. So what can we do to make sure that we're reaching to all those vulnerable people in our community, particularly the disabled and the elderly?
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, on a very practical level, we will, of course, have paper copies of the next consultation available, so those can be distributed. I think it is a challenge. You're quite right to raise that. We've spoken to a number of partners, to the voluntary sector, and I would also implore members, if you're able to help link up with groups and people that you know in the community. Officers more than willing to come and have conversations, and we're able to do things remotely. There's a balance, isn't there, between the amount of officer resource we've got to go out into the community, and I'd say councillors are a really important resource at a local level. So if you're able to link us up with groups in particular, if a group says to you we feel excluded, please put them in touch. You know, we're very happy to link up with them and try and facilitate that.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on from what Ed was saying, getting young people involved is really important. Is there any chance that there could be interaction with the schools, the secondary schools in particular? I don't think they were on the list, so, and that would help plug the gaps around the city that are not going to be filled by Community Trust because they are only in 3 places. That I would really like to try to see that.
Would very much like to be able to do that. I think I would just caution a little bit with the timetable that we have and the resource available. We've got a number of focus groups. We can certainly contact the schools and write to them. I think having an officer being able to go and meet focus groups in lots of schools is probably a little more than our resource has. But if there's anything in particular and you've got a school coming forward, would like to do something, I'm happy to talk about dates and see what we can work out.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. One of the things that I'm very grateful for is the addition of the word proactively in terms of attracting business and large employers. And my question is, what are we doing from the consultation point of view to engage with big businesses, not necessarily just the ones that are in the city already, but ones that could potentially invest in the city or do business with the city? Is there any scope for engaging with those type of individuals?
Chair, I think actually there's probably 2 stages there. So the first one is the consultation on the council's vision for the city. I've been in a meeting with the Worcestershire Growth Hub this afternoon about doing an event early in the new year with some of their businesses that they're grouped into the small, medium, the larger businesses. So we'll look to do some consultation engagement there. I think wider outside of the city, that's probably a bigger task to get a large business to be able to comment usefully on the future of Worcester before they know what Worcester's about. So that may be an activity that comes further down the line out of the strategy. Something we'd have to look at in future years, months.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to say thank you to officers for this, but also thank you to all the members for engaging in this process as well. The timetable, we did amend it to allow further public consultation, which I really appreciate. I have a specific ask. Could we please make this available in large print? I think that would make a real difference to a lot of people. But I also wanted to say that, you know, you've packed in a lot in quite a small word count. And I think, you know, if we don't get this properly consulted on, it's a real shame, actually, because I know we are trying to speak for our residents. We have been elected to do so, but at the same time, I'm sure other people will come up who are experts in different fields, who will come up with different things, or actually want to tweak some of the words. Maybe, you know, we've tried to do that, but, you know, I'm sure there's more out there. Thank you.
I don't think there was a question there. Thank you. It's large print. Okay, can we do large print?
Yes, I'm sure we can, and we will.
And I've got Ed come again.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me. I've got a couple of other quick questions. I was thinking in terms of, obviously we can raise the problem about young people and marginalised groups being excluded, but I wanted to raise just a suggestion which may prove not to be of any use, but there is a group of young people that we do have regular contact with through city councillor offices who I suspect may not have been asked, or we may not have thought to ask, and those would be the people that the youth team and the community safety team engage with. These are often the kinds of people who are themselves being moved on from community spaces and, you know, maybe redirected away from one place or another. These would seem like a group of people who might be ideal to ask, because they've probably got a pretty distinct idea of the sorts of things they might like to actually have access to. So it's just a thought. And hopefully wouldn't involve a ridiculous addition of officer resources, considering that there is already that contact and those relationships already exist. It's just a thought. And I will come back on another question, if I may. My second question was just a very quick one to ask why we seem to have placed arts and culture under heritage rather than the other way round. I would hate to think that we're giving up on our arts and culture as a thing of the past. I'm sure that is not the implication, but I just wanted to clarify on that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely. You can pick up with a detached youth team and see how we can form a suitable engagement, which may not be the entire plan, but some themes around the plan. We haven't sort of put arts, culture, heritage, built environment, natural environment in any particular order. We've put those all under, I think, the rich heritage and attractions that the city has to offer. So there's no deliberate ordering of those words.
That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I just might add a point about our ambition for the city and our city plan and how we want to take this forward. I think it's fantastic that there is always so much commitment around the Chamber to engaging with more people who truly represent the city. And some of you with longer memories will know how hard we tried with the play plan to get feedback from young people. I think it's really important that we recognise that, you know, the play strategy was the first document that we had at our city council level that was just exclusively focused on young people. What I was going to say, though, about the city plan is the city plan does not quite be all things to all people, but it does need to reflect the whole demography of the city and all the people and all the things that we want the city to do. But I think that it also needs to be a flexible document. It's a framework and it refers to our current plans and strategies. And in terms of the youth aspect specifically, I just wanted to flag up that you've probably picked up already that the national government wants to roll out a new national youth strategy, which is about, again, part of a national conversation. We've talked with our city plan about this being a conversational document, this not being a one-off opportunity for a conversation, it being the start of a framework, hopefully over 4 years, to talk about, okay, so how do we bring some of these words to life for you and what's relevant to you? So, you know, I think, I've been following these announcements about the National Youth Strategy, and I think we would acknowledge as a district council, sometimes it's helpful to have a national framework to work within as well. It's good to find some things that have been collected together and said at a national level. So I think we should keep our eye on the National Youth Strategy and see how we can respond to that. And it's just one example of where, if there are changes in a position nationally, whether that's on environmental sustainability, biodiversity, national youth strategy. We want our city plan to be flexible enough to respond to that. So I just want to encourage you to think that this isn't the only opportunity we've got to have that conversation. This will be an iterative process.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for their contributions. I think it absolutely illustrates that we do need a new plan. I think the nature of the conversation and the discussion would not have happened around the previous plan. It does illustrate that that was out of date, and really pleased. We did kind of discuss how many descriptors you can get in one strap line, but Worcester absolutely is, you know, ambitious, vibrant, welcoming, and we want it. We want the city to work for all our residents. So it is very much about setting a new tone. I mean, thank you to officers for drafting this and reflecting the conversations that we've had as councillors, you know, in a number of places. And it's really important, as Sian said, it is going to be an ongoing dialogue. You know, within it is that we are a listening council and that we work with stakeholders, we work with other agencies, we work with our residents within the city, and those, you know, require cooperation, working together and kind of ongoing dialogue. So in terms of the specific recommendation for committee this evening, so the committee approves the draft plan that is here as an appendix for consultation, and that consultation will commence tomorrow, is it, until
the 19th of January.
So all those in favour? Thank you, that's everybody, and we look forward to the feedback and any necessary tweaking of wording for the final version. Thank you. So then the last item on our agenda for this evening is annual safeguarding update. Sian?
Thank you, Chair. I will introduce this item. Obviously, the report author is our Head of Service for Homes and Communities, who's the Council's designated safeguarding lead officer. It's our commitment to bring an annual safeguarding update. Previously, this used to come to the Personnel and General Purposes Committee, and as you'll know, we've absorbed that now into the routine agenda of the Policy and Resources Committee. So for those of you who don't think you've seen this before, that would be why. Now, what we do in our annual safeguarding report is we just set out again what responsibilities we have in relation to safeguarding. And members, you're aware that obviously, because we're not a social care authority, we have fewer contacts with those who have safeguarding considerations. Nevertheless, we do still have obligations, both under the Children Act and under the Care Act, which applies to adults, to be proactive around safeguarding concerns if we identify safeguarding concerns, to make sure that we are working in a multi-agency way, that we are highlighting people who might be at risk of abuse or neglect, and making appropriate referrals. So we are under duties, and obviously we do work naturally in a multi-agency environment, both with statutory agencies and voluntary and charity organisations. The annual safeguarding report always provides an update to members on compliance with training. So there's a section that talks about mandatory training, and I know that you see our training records anyway as part of our report to our quarterly performance report, which is another agenda item for Policy and Resources, which will, I suppose the next one will come at our next scheduled meeting in February. You'll also note that we've responded to councillor feedback and said we will have a dedicated workshop style event with members in early 2025. I think we're socialising dates for January, February, which will be the chance to have a kind of two-way conversation about safeguarding and mental health and vulnerable customers in the context of Worcester City services. So not just a sort of one-way briefing, a conversation about how things are working. And in that context, I would just distinguish what safeguarding is in terms of people who are at risk of abuse or neglect. It's not necessarily all aspects of mental health, for example. It's not all aspects of social care. It's a specific sort of type of risk of harm criteria. There's a section of the report that refers to referrals that the council has made, and primarily those have come from the community safety team, and some have come from housing as well, as you would expect. The report notes the multi-agency groups that we most regularly work through. And then in terms of a bit of assurance work this year, the report notes that the council participated in a self-assessment audit process, which was overseen by the safeguarding partnerships, and was ultimately, the self-assessment scores were scrutinised by the children and adult safeguarding boards, that the district council's assessment scores, as I say, validated externally, were good across the board, apart from leadership and accountability, which scored outstanding. And then finally, the report just goes on to refer to a couple of specific service areas and initiatives which relate to the Worcestershire picture, where again we're trying to support some more innovative multi-agency working. One is the complex adult risk management framework, which is led by the County Council, but of which we've been a partner. And the report notes that there are some questions over the sustainability of that approach, with funding reductions proposed. And then finally, Making Every Adult Matter, which is a national initiative led by a number of charities actually, and has, I think, up to 40 local authority areas involved. And we have joined as one of 10 local authority areas who've joined in the 2024 cohort. And again, Making Every Adult Matter is looking at individuals holistically who are facing multiple disadvantage, and trying to make sure that it's one of those not falling through the gaps initiatives. In terms of how that works in Worcester City, it's our housing service who is leading on that, because that's where those customers are most likely to relate to the council. And I know that some of you have been liaising with officers as that Making Every Adult Matter approach has been rolled out. Chair, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions and take any points away that need a written reply.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really important report, and I think no councillor should underestimate the importance of safeguarding, particularly in our roles in the community. You know, it's just such an important area. You only have to turn on the news and there have been safeguarding concerns raised, and it's such an important position that we hold in our communities that we shouldn't take this report lightly. It's really very important. I do just have one question of the monitoring officer, and I may well have read the report incorrectly. At 3.6, I note that mandatory level 1 safeguarding training is a requirement for all members of staff, and yet at 3.6 we talk about only 87% of staff have access to the training and completed it. Have I read that correctly? And why is it only 87%? Why are we not at 100%?
Through you, Chair. I think the target is set at 90% in any given year. That's to accommodate staff turnover. So we make it a mandatory module for every member of staff. We have a workforce of 330. I say, yeah, and we obviously have to make sure that we can accommodate all of staff's training needs within that rolling programme. So all of the staff for whom that's a mandatory training model will do it. And there is a discipline through the corporate management team of chasing up non-compliance.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I thought I'd perhaps misread it a little bit, really. I mean, it is really important, and all councillors really as well should be encouraged to participate in the training. I've done it elsewhere, and it just crops up in the most odd places where you have to report safeguarding. So I do encourage all councillors should participate in the training.
Thank you, Chair.
just wanted to sort of comment and ask a question about the complex adult risk management framework. In my day job, I've had cause to be involved in this process, and I have to say I think it's an extremely valuable framework. Quite a lot of situations do not meet the threshold for like Section 42 investigations, and even when there are significant risks. So this calm framework really provides sort of a catch for those people that don't meet that threshold, and I certainly found it extremely valuable, and the contribution of our housing team was fantastic, and you really could see how providing this framework where agencies get together and can share information has a significant impact on people who are vulnerable. So it was quite concerning to me to read in 6.2 about the loss of the CALM coordinator, and the report mentions that sort of the kind of actions around transitional arrangements are being considered by the Task and Finish group. So my question really is that Task and Finish group, is that County Council Task and Finish group, and what can we as a council do to mitigate this loss of the CALM coordinator?
Through you, Chair. I mean, I think the officer who's provided this report, who's our safeguarding lead, identifies this as a risk, which is why it's been highlighted to yourselves. And through your leadership, you may wish to, raise your concerns. As you say, it's a coordinator post is led by the County Council. I'm not sure when the Task and Finish group, which is County Council led, is reporting, but we can certainly get an update on that for members.
I mean, I might be able to add a little in that as a county councillor, I'm on the Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee. So we had a presentation around, well, scrutinising a number of things, and CALM, the complex adult risk management, came within that. So it's my understanding that it falls within that officer post that's at risk is part of the adult safeguarding service. They certainly were lobbying at the scrutiny committee for the post to continue, but as with all local authority, it depends on the budget, it depends on the amount of money, the grant money received, as to how that is chosen to be spent. I mean, as to whether we want to sort of formally say, give a message from this council that it's a valuable resource. I've certainly had contact with it as well, but it was my experience maybe wasn't quite as positive, but but happy, if people want to send a specific message to the county council that this is valued, we can do that. Just seeing are there any other comments. I mean, I completely agree. This is a really important part of our governance and our responsibilities as a public body, and we as councillors encounter, and our officers encounter, some really vulnerable people and concerning situations. So it's really good to see that the assessment for this council is good across all areas and outstanding for leadership and accountability. And I'd like to put on record, well done to those who've provided that leadership and that have delivered on that and are maintaining it. The Making Every Adult Matters, again, if I can, well done to our city housing officers for actually initiating this and kind of applying for this council to take on this approach. And I was part of the initial training day that took place recently, and it absolutely, so it was a multi-agency Lots of different organisations were there across health, social care, MAGS, St Paul's, a whole range of others. There was a bit of a gap from adult social care, but we are looking to connect that up and rectify it. But absolutely, no, the really practical challenges of individuals falling between bits of the system and difficulties in accessing at, you know, a very basic level. You know, if you don't have a home address, there are all sorts of obstacles to accessing care. And if you have certain conditions, you know, it's really difficult to sit in an A&E waiting room in order to access a scan, if that's a difficult environment. And if you miss an appointment, then you get struck off for further appointments. So there's lots of really practical differences that can be made. So this is the MEME approach is the beginning. That was kind of launched in terms of agencies earlier this month. So we'll look at, you know, rolling that out and the impact that will hopefully have in the new year for our residents. So well done on that. So recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of this report and in particular the progress and updates in respect to our safeguarding responsibilities. Happy with that, everybody? Thank you very much. Thank you. And I think that brings the meeting to a close. And I'm probably safe to say Happy Christmas. There can't possibly be any more council meetings before the 25th of... No emergency meetings, Julian. Happy Christmas. Enjoy the break, and sure I'll see you all in the new year, if not before. Thank you.